our spirit and we're going back to what we said before, a hardened heart cuts us off from God. And so we need to manage our heart. What creates a hardened heart is our wounds, our past wounding. When wounds get internal, God, or I lost a loved one and I'm upset, or I had a breakup, or this tragedy happened. And when you find that place that has been unresolved, then you find a place where disconnection sometimes starts to happen. So they're intimately integrated. On the other hand, the other is true, is that sometimes I've noticed, and HollyKem has too, when we help someone walk through a very painful aspect of their life and they start to come to terms with it, they often reconnect with God at levels that are deeper than they have had in years. And so it's by embracing and coming to at peace with the brokenness that we all experience that is often the very place that we discover God on a deeper level. So our emotional growth and our spiritual growth are intimately connected. And when we get stunted in our emotional growth, it will stunt our spiritual growth.
Yeah. And I would say too, is that, when we get traumatized and when we get wounded and hurt, that part of us gets like put in a bucket. And that, we don't have time, or there's reasons why we just can't deal with it in the moment, like the whole thing, like you go in a hospital and your leg gets broken and you stay there till it gets healed, right? And you can walk again. Well, we know that doesn't happen. You break your leg, they put something on and they send you home, right? And you get checked in on. So it's like through the process, you're living life and you're dealing with your leg, right? Well, it's the same thing emotionally. Okay. So what happens is that will get, because you can't see it, it'll get kind of pushed aside, like I won't really do the physical therapy or whatever. I won't do the emotional work for it. So it just kind of puts it aside. And as that bucket gets fuller and fuller through my life, and, from a kid up, is that then I just start to, as Dean would say, harden my heart. I start to protect myself, because I don't want to get hurt again. My bucket's already full. I'm already overwhelmed, I'm already kind of not trusting or afraid. So then there's my true self, who I really am, who God intends me to be, right? And everything that he's given me. And then there's the wounds, and then there's the protection, right? So in that process, what happens is God gets put in those buckets as well. Because if he's almighty and he can do anything and he is the creator of all things, then, as a child, well, then why is this? So what happens is in that part of me, I start to think more small, not as mature. As we say, we all want to be a mature Christian, right? Where we don't have to call our prayer partner, where, if they took away the word, the Bible, like they have in China, that we would know the word, right? We want to become a mature person. We want to know how to use the word in our heart, not just on the paper, right? How to have a rhema word, right? So, but when I'm wounded, what happens is, I have this view of the way I see the world. So then I react to that, right? So what gets cut off is the sunlight of the spirit, So in that, as I start to work and love these parts of me that are wounded and then want to protect me, and I love that, then all of a sudden I am open again to my true self, who God intended me to be. And then I can be obedient to God. I can hear God and I can study better. I can get that in my heart. So then it's not hardened to others or to him.
That's really good. We have to deal with it when we push it aside, right? Yeah. It's like we're pushing our growth in God aside. And it's sometimes we wonder why we can't hear from him. But a lot of times we didn't do the last thing he asked, whether it's forgive someone or whatever the case may be, right? So that's really good. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So what are like some practical ways that our listeners can grow emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually?
Some practical ways. Well, that's a good question. We have a wonderful process in our book, A Roadmap to the Soul, that is actually a workbook. But what we do there, and which I suggest for you listeners, is we need to recognize, like one of the questions I often ask new clients, I say, what are 3 experiences any time in your life that have been very difficult for you? And so oftentimes the 3 things that come to mind usually are events that have been very impactful that haven't been fully resolved. Mm-hmm. So, this person close to me died, or I had this breakup, or I had was assaulted, or whatever. So you recognize the hurts. And then we also look at what are three things, behaviors that I have that help me cope with life that end up hurting me. So that could be I use this drug, I eat, I don't eat, I isolate, or whatever.
I work too much.
I work too much. And identify those behaviors. And then third, we ask, what are the three things that you love the most or most important to you? Or three of your best characteristics. So anyway, we start to help people identify what we call the three parts of ourselves. The part of us that carries our pain, the way we've coped with life that work for us, but eventually work against us, and who we really are. And then we help start to work with and understand and separate. And those two, my pains and my coping behaviors, are what spiritually we call the flesh. And who we really are is our spirit. And so we work a process on how to help the spirit win over the flesh as opposed to the flesh win over the spirit. And practically, there's lots of things to do, but one practical thing to do is to externalize that the problem occurs inside of us when we internalize experiences. And the way healing occurs is through externalizing. So that could be with a close friend, that could be writing, drawing, some artistic expression. It could be certainly a life coach, a therapist, but it's somehow experiences need to be externalized in order to start moving towards healing.
And I was just going to say, guilt, in the Christian world, we know that word very well. And when I feel guilty about something, just for the listeners, we all could pull one or two up really easy. Oh yeah, we know those. That's an indication that is not who I really am, or I would not feel guilty about it. So one of the indicators is that if I feel guilty about the way I spoke to my husband or my children or my best friend or the people at the store, that there's a part of me that was rude. But the truth is I feel guilty about it because it's not really who I am in my heart. So all of a sudden it starts to be like, okay, there are two different parts of me. And who do I want to empower? I want to empower the part of me that feels bad about that because that's who I really am. I'm not that person that's rude. I have to take responsibility for being rude, but it's really not who I am. Yeah. So all of a sudden you start to what we help people do is really separate those things so you can start to empower the good thing. It's just like when my kid, we have one son, and when he was little, I've always called him sweet boy. Okay. And he's 25 now, but I just call him sweet boy. And when he would be
we still do.
Yeah, we still do. But when he was not sweet, what I would say, instead of saying bad boy, I would say, that's not my sweet boy that does that. Where's my sweet boy? And so I would empower who he really was. And he would say, oh, Mom, I'm sorry. I said, I know you're sorry because that's not who you really are. No, Mom, I'm sorry. Because I wanted, instead of saying, you're so bad, but then I would be empowering the other side, right? Yeah. The part of him that is not being healthy and treating people with kindness and respect. So it's the same thing for ourselves on doing that. It's learning the part of me who I really am, that I am a kind, loving person. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I want to be more like that. And just like we have to meditate on the word, so we become the word, right? Jesus was the word. He became the word, right? Same thing for us. But there's things in us that are very human, and we need to look at that and love it. You don't just throw away the bad teenager. You love the bad teenager so they can come back to who they really are, right? The person that you have been empowering their whole little life.
That's really, really good. Asking yourself, why do I feel guilty about this? Yeah. And is this who I really am? And then also too, the piece you said about like your son, I think for parents, that helps to understand, like we actually do need to speak life into our kids. And even if they're not reflecting what we're speaking, to the true essence of who God created them to be, right? So sometimes it's harder said than done because I have 3 kids.
Yes. It is harder said than done.
I understand how difficult it can be, but I also understand how important it is to speak life into them, even if it doesn't match what I'm seeing right now. Then I've noticed too, like a change in my son, my middle one, how when I've done that, he calms down and he's like, he's more ready to be embraced and ready to turn his behaviors around. Like it does make a difference
It does. It really works because you're speaking to who they really, really are. And they know that that's not who they are. Just like we know that's not who we are. But when I speak into the truth and I speak to them, their true self, then I'm not ignoring it. I'm just saying that's not who you are. You are my sweet boy. You are my kind boy. You are so, and I give an example. You see people with such compassion. And then they're like, kind of jolted back because they're like,
there's something really powerful to the things that we speak over our children.
Right.
I remember HollyKem, she used to watch this soap opera, The Young and Restless.
Yes.
And they had a guy, I think what was it, Shamar?
Shamar. Oh, Shamar.
It was a fella.
Beautiful.
She's watching the soap opera and I walk by, and I don't watch the soap opera, but this guy's on, and I don't say this about guys. I mean, I'll say it maybe about women, but I said, that guy's really beautiful, and he looked beautiful, So about a week later, he was on Oprah, and HollyKem said, come see that guy. He said it was beautiful. He's on Oprah. And so he's being interviewed. So this is what happened when we sat down. He said that his mom was Caucasian, his dad was African-American, and that when he grew up, he didn't know what he was. And he would come home from school and he'd say, Mom, what am I? Am I black or am I white? And he said,
what color am I?
What color am I? Mm-hmm. And his mom would always say, you're just beautiful. He said, no. Tell me, Mom, am I this or am that? He's just trying to figure out where his place was. Mm-hmm. She'd say, you're just beautiful. And he said, she did that his entire childhood. And so years later, he's on a soap opera and he is a white man walking through the living room, sees him on the TV. And the first thing I say about him as a man, which I never say, is that guy's beautiful. It became so much part of him that he's emanating it. Mm-hmm. And I recognize it. And he's telling the story. And from that moment, LaShaundra, I was like, wow, that's the power of words over our kids, right? Yeah. The things that we speak over them consistently gets internalized. And that happened with our son.
Yeah.
We called him Sweet Boy. It was just sort of a term, an endearing term. But we would go to parent-teacher conferences. And every year they would say a number of things. He needs to improve in this and that. But they'd always say, but he's such a sweet boy. And they'd use the same vocabulary.
Exactly.
And it's what we've been speaking over him. And so yeah, I agree that in correction, it's often good to speak the opposite over them. And that's just the creative process, right?
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you so much for sharing that. So transitioning a little bit, I wanted to talk about your book. It had a lot of really great points, but one thing you said was, without God, there is no healing. And you also speak a lot about the soul. So why is it important, I guess, with kind of reconnecting with your soul or rediscovering your soul? Why is it important during that process to do it with God's help?
Well, when we first came back into the four walls, at that point, there was a lot of communication about the soul in more than a negative situation. But I knew God had given me this. I mean, I'm not that smart, So it's like, I knew this came from the Lord and it works, right? But so I'm quiet. I'm a good student. I'm going to listen, right? So through the process, that teaching had changed, But when we talk about scripture and God wants us to prosper as our soul prospers. So if our soul must prosper, for me to prosper, it has to happen. So if my soul is sick, if I don't have soul care, if my soul is sick, which is my will, my mind, and my emotions, then I'm going to be led in not a healthy way. So how does my soul get sick? I get wounded in life, right? That's my will, my emotions. Right? So in that, learning to love that part of me that has gotten so hurt. And now I'm not thinking well, right? Because God did not give me the spirit of fear. He gave me what? The spirit of love, the spirit of power, and the spirit of a sound mind. So that means if fear is overwhelming me, I'm not going to think right. So my mind is not working well. I don't have any power and my love is tainted, right? So if I don't know how to love my soul, then what's going to happen is that's going to have more power than my spirit. Is the spirit more powerful? Yes. In Romans 8:11, what does it say? That the same spirit that took Jesus from hell and brought him out with all of those demons is the same spirit that lives in us. Okay. So is the spirit more powerful than the soul? Yes. However, if I don't understand that and this soul is overtaking me because it's been wounded, I'm not going to understand that. So by me taking my spirit and God's spirit and loving myself, then all of a sudden my soul is being healed. And then when it speaks, it's not speaking ugliness. And if it does, I can take my spirit and love it. So it becomes quieter. And what becomes the loudest is my truth, my spirit, God's spirit in me, the word of God.
Yeah, Jesus said, he said the greatest commandment is to love God, right? Yeah. The vertical dimension, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. That's really our purpose in life. And so what I've discovered is that, and the relationship with ourself and our relationship with others has a lot to do with the soul. What I've discovered is that if we grow in one of those relationships, it severely impacts the other two. So if I learn to have a greater love for myself, it's going to impact how I treat you and my understanding of God. If I have a spiritual encounter where I have a deeper understanding and love of God, it's going to impact how I treat another and how I feel about myself. And if I get reconciled in a relationship that's been broken and I have healing there, it's going to affect how I feel about myself and my understanding of God. So the soul work is very important because as we do that, it improves our connection and brings us along down the continuum of our purpose, where Jesus says, you need to grow in love in these three relationships. Just start on one of them and it'll have an impact on the other two.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to remember, like, we need God's help for everything. There's nothing that we can do, like, apart from him. So we need his help in all areas of our lives. Definitely.
Yes. And he's interested.
Right. Exactly. Even the things that we think are like so small, like not important, he cares about the things that concerning us. Right. So.
Oh, definitely. And sometimes that's what, it even makes it even better because wait, that was really little. And how'd that happen? That he knows us.
Yeah.
And when we open our eyes to allowing him and we realize, wow, that was no coincidence. That was him, Yeah. There he was once again.
Yeah. So what advice can you give married couples who maybe are struggling, their marriage is in trouble? What advice can you give them if they want to hold on to their marriage, they want it to work, to kind of heal their broken marriage?
One of the things that I would say is one of the things I had to do because I've been divorced and married again. And I had to really look at the person that I married. Did he really, does he really want to hurt me? Like I'm hurt, right? I'm like, does he really want to, did I really pick somebody that really, really on purpose wants to hurt me? And the answer was no. No, he does not. Am I hurt? Yes. So from that aspect, it was like, okay, when I would speak to him, I say, I know that you didn't mean to hurt me on purpose. And all of a sudden, all of the guards go down, right? He's able to hear me. He doesn't have to defend himself because I'm telling him, I know you did not do this on purpose. However, I'm hurt. And when you start the conversation like that, in that situation, all of a sudden, he's able to hear what I'm saying, even if it's kind of muffled and I don't really know how to say it because I don't want to hurt his feelings, but I am hurt. So I need to say it so he can then communicate back to me. I had no idea that was going to hurt you. I'm sorry that hurt you, whatever. But first saying, I know you didn't mean to do this on purpose, but I am hurt. And I can say that is one tool that I took that I didn't do in the first marriage that I do in the second one that has made a big difference for communication and allowing for when communication is like playing tennis or pickleball today, as they would like to do. Somebody hits the ball's in the other court, and you have to wait for them to hit it back. So if I slam it at him and at his head, well, guess what? He's either going to take the ball and leave, or he's going to slam it back at my head. But if I send it over there and serve it gently, he has an opportunity to send it back gently. So in communication, we always talk about the presentation. Well, what is it that I really mean, even though I'm really hurt? So I can say that has been just one tool that has really been powerful, and that really helps.
Yeah, I would add to that. When I have a couple come in and we start working with them, one of the questions I have is, I'll say, if it was with you, I would say, what is it? And I would say to your husband, what is it? 3 things that you love about LaShaundra? And then I would ask you the same question about him, right? And sometimes in just starting to remember and to reconnect with the very best part of who that person is and what I fell in love with begins to rekindle things. Also get into trying to find what are the things that we need to repent for and what are the things that we need to forgive for. And so there's questions around that. And it's amazing. Once I get to know what those are, I have the couple sitting on the sofa and the need to look at each other's eyes. And I say, fill in the blank. I coach them. I say, I apologize for, and fill in the blank. And they'll say, I apologize for ignoring you and not speaking to you when I'm upset. I apologize for spending that money and didn't check with you. I apologize for, and I just coach them through that. And after they finish that, I say, and usually the other person is tearing up because they're hearing this. And I say, what do you see in their eyes? And they'll say, I see sadness. I see hurt. I see this and that. And then I have the other one do the same. I apologize for, fill in the blank. And then they do the same thing. What do you see in your spouse's eyes? Oh, I see hurt. I see this. I see love. I see this. And then I say, ask them, will you work on forgiving me?
And did you hear the question? Will you work on it?
Work on it, right?
Okay.
Not to forgive. Will you work on forgiving me? And then, yes, and they do that to each other. And there's something in just facilitating that very simple process that the whole atmosphere of the room changes. It's not necessarily fixed, but we have a great start. So just facilitating and practicing those principles, or what is it you want? If you want to reconcile a relationship and you're struggling, talk about what you love about the other person and verbalize what you need to apologize for. And that's going to be a great start.
Good. So, HollyKem, what I heard from you was how important effective communication is, right? And then Dr. Dean, I would say that accountability and just really taking ownership of your part in it and what you're going to do within that situation and within marriage helps the most.
Yes.
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 That's definitely right on. You have good communication skills.
Oh, thank you.
That's one of the keys, exactly what you're doing. What you're doing is exactly it. Am I hearing you correctly? And when you can say that, now, if I said, no, this is what I was trying to say. And it didn't matter if I said it wrong or you didn't hear it right. It doesn't matter. Is that you were asking me, is that exactly what you were trying to say? This is what I hear. And then I said, yes. So now even though we may have different words for definitions for different words, but the message got across and then I agreed with you. So in that is great communication for the listeners. Y'all need to hear that is great communication. It's not that we agree or we don't agree. That has nothing to do with it. Is that one person said something, a message, the other person made sure they got the message correctly. And then that was validated. Then you can go to the next stage if we need to negotiate or whatever. But that's the first step of all communication.
Fantastic. Yeah. I have one last question for you. Okay. What is one verse that got you through your darkest, hardest time in life that you can share with our community so that they can be encouraged? You could do one together or individually.
I'll go with mine.
Good.
Well, I spoke it already, but it's my favorite one. It's Romans 8:11. is that the same spirit that took Jesus from hell, it was the same spirit that lives within us. And for me is that anything that the enemy is trying to take from me, anything the enemy is pushing down or oppressing me, that, wherever I feel like I'm in hell, feel like, oh, it's overwhelming, all that the Spirit of God has the power, and that Spirit lives in me. And that if I connect with that Spirit, there's nothing that God cannot do.
Good. Love that one.
Yeah, that one's my favorite.
I would say Psalm 23, the first two lines is, the Lord is my shepherd, and all my wants are taken care of, or I shall not want. All my dreams, all my wants. Why it's a life verse is that if I make him my shepherd, and I've studied out the relationship of shepherd and a sheep is different than a goat. A sheep is a very obedient animal. You say go left, it goes left. The goat, you say go left, it goes right. So this is sheep and the goat. But the sheep also doesn't have good eyesight. So if you have a room and you have a light in one corner and it's dark in the other, all the sheep will gather around the light. And a sheep also has pinpoint hearing, that if you were a shepherd and you left for a year and you came back and you called out to your sheep and they didn't see you, they would recognize their voice and they'd say, that's my shepherd. And so my job is to hear, to keep my ears open to hear, to hang out in the light, and to be obedient. And if I do those three things, then all of my wants and all my desires will be taken care of. I make him my shepherd, and all my needs, all my wants are taken care of. And there's so much more in that verse about leading to green pastures and still waters and protecting us from the enemy. But that's what I aspire to, is to always make him my shepherd. And when I do that, then everything is taken care of.
Wow, what an impactful way to end out this episode. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can our community learn more about you or purchase your book?
Yeah, you can go to ihaveavoice.com and you can hook up with our free YouTube channel with all hundreds of videos. You can have a link to our book, A Roadmap to the Soul. Or if you're really interested in taking a deep dive, we have a 4-month coaching program called Transform You for individuals and couples. But that all can be found at I Have a Voice.
Awesome. And I will put everything in the description so they can easily find all your information. And to our lovely community, thank you so much for listening and stopping by today. I will see you in the next episode. Bye.